Few movies disappeared from our shelves. We caught them late one night, trying to steal the podcast from us.
36.2 VMAU Bad Movies Radio, Spokane, Washington.
I'm Raul.
And I'm Dara.
Good morning, scumbuckets.
Sure, they only had a couple Jensen 315s with the speaker volume cranked up, but with the right set of amplifiers, no one within a half-mile radius was safe.
It's okay. It's time to wipe the tears from your eyes. It's time for a brand new day.
You're dumb. Why are you crying?
The room made me cry. It was so sad. Everyone betrays Johnny. I've been crying all night.
In other news, it's just come to my attention that the International Bad Movie Conspiracy has been attempting to stop the distribution of the Voyage of the Rock Aliens. But little do they know, we've been in contact with the Rock Aliens themselves. It's time to band together and stop the International Bad Movie Conspiracy.
You can help us save this poor movie. All you need to do is go to Tubi or Amazon and go watch this movie.
Yeah, go watch this bad movie. Go watch it right now.
What? Voyage of the Rock Aliens isn't a bad movie. You have Jermaine Jackson dirty dancing with Pia Zadora. Craig Sheffer is strutting around like a natural beast. And Tom Nolan, well, he can abduct me any day.
BMAU Radio had everything you could want from a podcast. They just couldn't help but get into arguments about the movies.
Cut her throat.
No, that's his sister.
Argument.
Oh my god, I am living for that outfit right now.
Where's Meryl Streep? You said Meryl Streep was in this movie.
After argument.
What? Let me guess, he misses a shot again.
Shut up. China's on screen.
That's when we stepped in.
Mom, have you seen my peanut butter? I'm not bad.
Some are just plain rotten.
I'm just built that way.
Geez, that's not cranberry sauce.
High five.
But what?
He's among us.
All of the music you hear in this episode was kindly provided to us by Rhema, as well as Mark Jackson's My Rich Friends project. Please check out the album Shine by Rhema to hear more.
Please stay tuned for part 2 as we have an exclusive interview with Mark Jackson and Jeff Casey, the actors who played 2 of our favorite space aliens, AU and FG. You know the feeling you get after you watch your favorite bad movie for the first time, and all you want to do is watch it again and again, so it stays stuck in your memory forever? Well, what would you do if you could only see that movie one time and you could never find it again? That's sadly something that happened with this movie to a lot of people. You might have seen it one day on Canadian TV, or maybe in a German theater after its release, only to never be able to find it again. What if you watched it the one time it premiered in America? It reminded me of a specific episode of a show I used to watch as a child. The show was a mid-90s Nickelodeon low-budget live-action sitcom called Pedan Pete. You know those shows that really stick with you? That leave a lasting impression on you that follows you into adulthood? Well, Pedan Pete was one of those shows for me. And I say for me, but really for me and my brother. And there's a lot of reasons that we probably got hooked on the show. It might have been the fact that we were big Nickelodeon kids, or the fact that Pete and Pete seemed so similar to Alan and Andy. They were a pair of brothers that lived in the Pacific Northwest just like us. They used to go on long road trips with their family. And just like us, they were a pair of brothers that were tied at the hip and were just a year or two apart. There's a special kind of bond that brothers at that kind of age distance have. Not necessarily all brothers, but definitely some brothers. Brothers like me and mine, and brothers like these 2 that we watched on TV. By the way, if you happen to live on the streets in Washington in the mid-90s where my brother and I were trick-or-treating with our oversized pillowcases that were already full of candy at 11:30 at night while we were still going door-to-door, waking up resident after resident in a half-mad attempt to try and secure a year's worth of chocolate, we apologize. We got the grift from Pete and Pete, just so that you know. And really, I've been thinking about this particular episode of the show. It's an episode where Little Pete discovers his favorite song. You see, as we introduce into the episode, we'll learn that Little Pete had a favorite smell, and he had a favorite star, and he even had a favorite internal organ, but what Little Pete didn't have was a favorite song. And in this episode, A Hard Day's Pete, Little Pete is running late for school, trying to race against the clock, trying to make it to school on time. And the mathematical impossibility of him actually making it there on time is laid out to us in a small cutaway segment featuring Pete's math teacher. As such, Little Pete decides to take a new shortcut to school to try and make up for lost time, and while on this shortcut, Pete is riding his bike as he innocently hears some music coming from an open garage. Music that stops Pete, dead in his tracks. Even though he's late for school, he stops and listens, because instantly, deep down, he knows that this song that he's listening to right now, this is his favorite song. And he takes a moment to listen to this song before heading off to school, humming and playing it to himself as he rides along on his bicycle. But he never learns the name of the jingle. And as the days pass, the song starts to drift from his mind slowly, sailing into the fog until he can barely remember it at all. It's a sad episode as he tries everything he can to remember the song to the point of forming a band just to try and replay the little bit of it he remembers to help jumpstart his memory. Still, it slowly fades away. Has anyone seen the Neverending Story? Not the first one, but the second one. Because this reminds me so much of that movie, and if you haven't seen it, the basic premise of the movie is that Bastian has gained the ability to wish for things in Fantasia at the end of that last movie that we saw, and in the sequel, an evil sorceress binds his wishing power to his memory, causing him to lose a memory every time that he makes a wish. Bastian slowly loses his memories as he makes wishes trying to save Fantasia until all that he has left is a single memory of his father, which he now holds as a physical orb in his hand. And just like Bastian's memories slowly fading from him, this song slowly fades from Pete's mind until all he can remember is just one single note. And it is despite all of Pete's efforts to remember, and only with the aid of random chance that he can once again stumble upon this band, playing their hit song. But this time he listens, allowing the song to become fastened and forever secured within his mind. It's a touching little story, and it reminds me a lot of how I found this movie. Because for me, it was late one night when I discovered this movie, and I was half asleep, falling asleep really, watching my usual tripe on Tubi. And at the time, I happened to be watching some jumbled collection of schlocky B-roll movie promos all stitched together into a movie reel. It was decent enough background, but I had begun to tune out about halfway through, as the constant stream of mid-80s sexploitation movies was whiling down my senses and fast. And while falling asleep, or possibly mid-dream, I recorded some brief mental snippets of this trailer. Some hot pink spacesuits, aliens, teens on the beach, untitled files deposited away in the download folder of my mind. And while this movie is drifting away from the conscious region of my mind, it leaves me with this vague feeling, a feeling I'm sure that you've all felt before. It's the reason this particular episode of Pedan Pete stuck with me so much. Because I know what it's like to watch as the fingers of your mind gently lose their grip and let go of a seamlessly priceless thought, releasing it into that dark obscurity of gray matter. And that's where this movie remained, hidden in that sunken place, until once again I'm looking for movies and I stumble across Earth Girls Are Easy, and it's most certainly not Earth Girls Are Easy that I'm interested in, but it's the thumbnail that's the thing. Looking at it, I can feel this feeling in my mind, a feeling kind of like flint being drawn across hot steel, exposing the freshly cooled iron to the surface, and just like that, I remember this critical detail, that they were rock and roll aliens, and that little spark, that little detail is all I needed to find it. Just something to get that fire started. I guess sometimes, just like little Pete, finding his favorite song, sometimes you don't find your favorite bad movie. Sometimes your favorite bad movie finds you. But like all of our bad movies, this one comes with a story, so I've got a story to tell you. I've got a story to tell you about the band that premiered in this movie. And it starts out in Arizona. Out in the Arizona heat, in the city of Phoenix, back in the 70s. In a city straddling the northeastern side of the Sonoran Desert. A place that could get up to 115 in the sun with people just willing to sweat that kind of weather. And AU, back long before he was ever a rock and roll alien, was just another Arizona kid trying to sweat away the heat. Listen to FM radio back in the days when pirating meant a different thing than it does now, and everyone was just casually making cassettes of their favorite hits. This was back when you could hear Stevie Wonder and Led Zeppelin in the same half hours as bands like Weather Report and the Crusaders. Everyone were listening to and picking up these different styles that were coming off the airways, and this was helping to create a lot of what would lead into the next decade musically. And Mark Jackson, he was just one more rebellious kid stuck in a Christian school listening to rock and roll music and getting thrown in detention. And it's in detention, stuck cleaning classrooms, where he met Huron Klaus, a Native American bassist and a cool cat in his own right, and together with a few other guys, these guys would start to form a band. At the time, it was still a high school Christian band, and in these early days, it was still called New Zion. New Zion eventually changed to a new name, becoming Rhema, and some new members joined the band, notably Bobby Freeman, who stayed with the gang all the way up until the movie, and this is way back. Back when they were still in high school, back when they were playing black gospel-style Christian rock, playing these small little venues called coffee houses. And I can tell you that they certainly did not sell any coffee. These were establishments only colloquially named, as they were actually made to serve up soft Christian rock for your listening pleasure. You certainly wouldn't get any coffee, but if you waited around long enough, you might just get to hear another hit or two by Revelations leader at the time, Jeff Casey, and our alien FG. As the band developed their skills, they began looking for a new style and tried to define their sound, a struggle that would plague the early days of Rhema. While Mark led a big push for a record deal, the band struggled at large. As the newly named Rhema struggled to find their footing beyond a few small Christian venues, frustrations mounted amongst the group as to what direction the band should go in. Tensions high and unable to find footing between their Christian origins and the new rock stylings of their leaders, Mark decided to take a hiatus, leaving Rhema behind for a year and a half as he rediscovered himself. Rhema, however, carried on without him. And when Mark came back, he found many of the original members gone, replaced by some familiar faces like Greg Bond, Patrick Burns, and Jeff Casey, and playing a contemporary style of Jimmy Springsteen-style pop rock. This would probably be the Rhema you're more familiar with, and it was this form of Rhema that really started to find footing. With Bobby Freeman on the bass, Mark and Greg taking vocals, and Pat and Jeff just playing guitars and drums, they started cutting their chops down at the block in an old dilapidated sound studio called Soundtech, ran by a crabby old woman who went by Sarge. A name that might have made a lot more sense if you had been with old Greg Bond when the band sent him down to that old hole-in-the-wall studio. With church TV playing in the background, Greg pleaded his case to this old lady named Sarge and her son. He was at least successful enough to score them some studio time, albeit with some dysfunctional equipment. Soundtech saw the band sink in time back into its Christian days, playing smooth tunes like Truckin' for Jesus while looking for a legitimate studio and trying to squeeze out extra time for their own recordings. They eventually managed to bust out a single called Running, as well as a few other Genesis-style songs, and with this handful of tracks recorded, they were finally able to convince the now-defunct Audio-Video Records to allow Rhema to record in a slightly less run-down studio than before. They would soon find themselves working for big shots like Dennis Alexander and recording alongside names like Glenn Campbell. With a big studio behind them came a renewed sense of focus, but not one that came without pressure. These were some of Rhema's most successful days, as well as some of their most chaotic. The struggle to define their genre and sound became more difficult as they were pushed in different directions by different people, all wanting them to sound like somebody else. Dennis Alexander pushed for a more marketable corporate sound. It was the Cars and the Tubes and Thomas Dolby making their ways onto the airwaves that finally convinced the Rhema boys to start heading in this new techno direction. And full of ambition and under budget, Mark Jackson and the gang made their rounds buying budget electronica, trying to ride out this new synth wave as far as it would take them. And after about a year recording and practicing, they would start putting out tracks you might know like Get Out and Dance, 21st Century, and Combine Man, and really solidifying that style that we all know and love them for. And it was this style that saw them making some serious headway in the business. Their producer, Dennis Alexander, had a friend named Dick Whitehouse, and Dick needed a techno band for a music project that Ed Gold had been cooking up. And this was right when Rhema was landing their biggest gig yet, scoring a solid slot at a serious venue in Scottsdale. So as the Rhema boys were getting ready for their concert at this venue called The Phone Company, Dick Whitehouse was already on the phone with Pia Sedora, and he was shopping the band around as an option. With the concert coming up, Pia and Dick hopped on their private jets to haul up all the way over to Arizona to see the Rhema boys live in action as they performed their one big gig. And they must have really rocked the house, because Rhema would soon find themselves going from performing their first concert to scoring their first performing contract to heading to Atlanta, Georgia to lead in a feature film. All of this happening within just a few short days. And having no acting experience prior, Rhema would soon get to meet their musical Moriartys in the movie as they, along with Jimmy and the Mustangs, were shipped off to endure 2 months of acting classes to prepare them for the big screen. However, after a couple of months' worth of classes, an already burnt-out group of post-teens weren't exactly ready for the screen test they were subjected to. A screen test that had been deemed unanimously by all members to have been an unmitigated disaster. A disaster from which an unfortunate Bobby Freeman was deemed to have performed the poorest, leaving him unceremoniously cut from the cast. Tom Nolan, fresh from his minor role in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Tom was cast to take the lead and help navigate the aliens in their acting adventure. A casting decision which worked out well as the group quickly found cohesion on the set, getting along and singing together in their downtime, and although Tom's voice was dubbed over the final cut, the aliens all agreed that he was more than capable of doing his own vocals. Alongside the time they were spending with Tom, the band was also